Well, shall I kick things off? Hello and welcome. I'm Dave, the MD at Thornton Lowe. Uh, this is our framework maximization session, super quick, hopefully 30 minutes or so. My background's social housing procurement, but procurement, contract management, supplier engagement is still a big part of what we do on our buyer side, helping the public sector. So we feel like we've got a really good grip on their needs, which can hopefully then help our supplier side on in terms of bidding. This session came about because there's an ever increasing number of frameworks, and we realised a lot of suppliers, contractors, providers are weighing up what's right for them. When there's thousands out there, but also certainly within the SME proportion of our client base, not always necessarily knowing how to use them as a sales tool. What can they generate from them? How can they sweat the framework to get the most out of it?
Hi everyone, I'm Adam. I'm the Procurement Solutions Manager here at Thornton Lowe. So I'll be taking you through our topic today on using public sector frameworks as a sales tool for your business. So before we get into the key topic, in terms of addressing this issue about being on a framework and not generating sales and how to be successful, let's just first lay a bit of groundwork to establish what is a framework. So what are we talking about basically? So essentially a framework is a multi-supplier agreement. So you think approved supplier list with many variations. So the long-term contracts that establish the terms and conditions for future purchases of goods or services from those approved suppliers. So essentially frameworks help public sector and third sector buyers to procure goods and services from suitable suppliers. They tend to run for a period of 4 years, so essentially a good revenue stream for your business. And there's normally a competitive bidding process over 4 to 6 weeks to where companies can bid to get on that framework. So in addition to frameworks, there are also dynamic purchasing systems, which you may or may not have heard of. So similar to frameworks, these are essentially approved supplier lists that run for several years. However, the main difference is these are continually open to new suppliers throughout the DPS period. They are increasing in popularity as they are often quite an accessible route to start working with the public sector. One good thing about them is you can reapply immediately if unsuccessful the first round. And there isn't a maximum number of suppliers for those, so they are quite accessible. So we've established what a framework is, but thinking back to our quote around not generating sales, when we have a client who is on a framework but typically sort of not winning work, there's a few questions we generally ask to find out why. So the key one really is, have you bid for the right framework? So there's a few things to consider here if you're on a framework but not getting any sales. So one is, and this is a really key one, so have you done research? So in bidding for the framework, did you complete research to understand whether it's likely to generate sales? So just an example, if you're able to look at contract award notices from previous iterations of the frameworks and spend data, you can get a realistic view of the opportunities that are likely to arise on the framework. So this gives you an idea of whether you're actually likely to generate sales if successful. So basically, it's all about identifying a suitable opportunity, but also a lucrative opportunity. So really looking into frameworks that align with your solution and actually have a history of generating high volume of opportunities. So the second point is, do the call-off procedures work for or against you? So what do I mean by this? So basically, there's different options for buyers and contracting authorities in terms of how the award process is set up for frameworks. And these will have implications in terms of your chances of generating sales on that framework. So let's have a bit of a dive into some of the different options. So yeah, so usually as part of the framework bidding pack, the call of procedures or process will detail how the authority is going to award contracts off the back of the framework. So one option they have is what I would call a restricted direct award. So some frameworks award contracts based on a ranking system. So this is where basically the highest overall scoring bidder is prioritized for direct award. So basically the high scorer or scorers are likely to have first dibs on the framework opportunities. So something to consider is if you are something of a challenger, potentially a smaller organization or not a leading provider, this particular call for arrangement might be a good reason to consider not proceeding or no bidding the framework. So think of doing all the work to squeeze yourself onto that framework, but then not coming top and not generating any sales because of that. So in contrast, another option is for the buyer is to set up for mini competition or further competition. So many frameworks will award contracts through mini competition or further competition process, which is likely to be assessed by a combination of quality and price usually. So again, in this case, it's really considering how you would fare in a mini competition process against other approved suppliers. So a good strategy to dig a bit deeper into this is to have a look at the tender pack and have a look at the mini competition template, which may be provided as information. So it's checking whether there's anything about the key requirements or the way the questions are asked that would put you at a disadvantage potentially in a mini competition. And again, it's just thinking about who your competitors are. And who you're going to be up against in that mini competition, and do you have a good chance of competing with those competitors? So the other option here we have here is, and this is where we start to think about a framework as a good sales tool. Some frameworks will allow for what we would call a non-restrictive direct award. So I think the G-Cloud Crown Commercial Service Framework allows for this, for example. So this can mean that public sector buyers can just place an order directly with the supplier they want to work with. There's a bit of an example there in the image of a framework where that's been set up like that. So they can just a buyer can place an order with the supplier they want to work with and that best suits their needs really. So this can be a really useful sales tool for you basically if you're approved on a framework of this type. Why do I say that? Because if you think about you're looking for a way for your existing clients to continue to use your services compliantly without having to go to a competitive tender process again, or as part of your business development and sales activity for attracting new customers, you're ideally looking for a framework that kind of allows for this type of direct award. It is allowing you to make existing and new customers aware that they can easily and compliantly use your solutions, which is really good. Just to be aware that direct awards do occasionally require a business case, but it does depend often on the value and strategic importance. So overall point here really is that knowledge is power. So it's going the extra mile to understand what you're bidding for, and the setup of the call-off arrangements. So before you bid, it's researching the call-off procedures and understanding whether you might be at a disadvantage, even if you are successful in getting on the framework. So say you've done your research, you followed our advice as we've outlined in the presentation, and you found a framework you're happy with. Even better, you've gone to the framework. How do you then maximize the benefit and ensure the generation of sales on the framework? So unfortunately, it is the beginning of the hard work, not the end. So for us, the key is engagement, really. Engagement, relationship building, and having a post-sales ward and marketing plan. So just as a quick note, first of all, a lot of companies don't actually realize you can market and do direct sales into the public sector. Basically because of obviously the procurement rules around everything going through portals in terms of communication. But to make it clear, once a contract notice is advertised, all communication is going through the portal and there's no contact outside that. But essentially any time before this, any time before or after a live opportunity, you're good to engage with buyers and market your solution in the public sector. Really, the things to consider is that the framework will be looking for you to bring customers and enhance the framework. So think of it as doing your duty as a supplier, really, making sure you're marketing the framework to potential buyers. So that takes us on to marketing rules. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show a couple of examples of framework marketing rules. But what these really demonstrate is that with the nature of the public sector, the buyers really want and need the framework to be a success. So for the framework management group or the framework management team who you'll be working with, it's really in their interest to have work going through the framework to meet their targets and sort of justify their own existence, really. So in light of that, we need to have them on side and we need to follow their marketing rules. So this gives you an example from the Crown Commercial Service. So these are some rules which apply to the frameworks in terms of how the suppliers should go about marketing. So they're giving them clear instructions on what they want them to do in terms of describing CCS. And then they're giving them instructions on what not to do as well in terms of promoting themselves on the framework. So in a slightly more colourful fashion, the ESPO framework, so giving the suppliers guidance on how to describe their position on the framework, using the logos and a very long list of what they should state in terms of their marketing. So and this just as a further thought on marketing, this list covers a whole host of different marketing channels which you can use to maximize framework success potentially. So for those people with a larger budget, you might be looking to perhaps try, if not all, then a range of these to see what works and to maximize your reach. If you do have a small budget, that's fine. It's essentially about finding out what's going to be the most effective channel and then using that consistently. So if you do have a smaller budget, some trial and error might be in order in terms of using the right channels. But to get back to maximizing the benefits of being on a framework, then it's really a mix of relationship building, proactive business development, obviously marketing, positioning yourselves as a thought leader and proactively generating leads. So if we think of it as kind of a process, you're on the framework. The first step is that relationship building, essentially. So we're thinking traditional approaches, really. So picking up the phone, meeting people, and establishing those key connections. And obviously, the key stakeholder to be aware of is whoever the framework management team are and the framework management group. We know about checking framework marketing rules. The second point is about identifying your target audience and messaging. So when you're planning your marketing strategies, it's thinking about who in the public sector you want to reach, what type of customer you want to bring to the framework. And then it's really tailoring your messaging and written content to what's timely and of interest to your audience. So think about any specific challenges or pain points in the sector which your solution addresses, and then it's getting that across in your marketing. And then step 4, we obviously have you then implement your sales and marketing strategy, again, using as many channels as you possibly can. And another key point would be as well to keep an eye on what your competitors are doing. You'll want to make sure you're not falling behind in terms of the methods and techniques they're using for marketing. And Step 4 then is develop case studies and testimonials. So it's showcasing those successful case studies and examples of the work you've delivered on the framework. This promotes both the framework and your company. Having a website landing page for those caseworks would be a great idea. Point 5 is a really important one to be first on networking and stakeholder engagement. So there'll be ample opportunities throughout the framework to attend events where public sector buyers are present. So you're thinking procurement events, conferences, pre-market engagement, all great opportunities to build relationships and directly pitch your solution. So identify what key events are out there, and try not to miss out. And again, keep an eye on what your competitors are doing. If they are attending specific events, it's usually for a reason. And then finally, so proactively communicate with prospects and leads. So we know the sales cycle in the public sector can be a bit longer compared to the private sector, but it's the same philosophy in terms of being proactive, patient, and persistent in your sales approach. So it's maintaining consistent communication and continuously following up with those prospects and leads, making sure you stay at the front of the mind of potential buyers. And also finally, just ensuring you have the right data as well. So making sure who the right contacts are in the public sector. So just as a quick summary then in terms of how a framework can be a best sales tool. So again, we come back to this point again around direct award frameworks in the sort of unrestricted sense. So these are potentially a perfect sales tool for your business if done right. Second point is just around again the revenue stream. So with approved supply status on a framework, you're gaining access to a ready market of potential new buyers, and hopefully you're bringing your existing clients along as well. So over 4 years, that's hopefully giving you a healthy sort of long-term revenue stream. And then finally, reputation building. So again, being approved on a framework with the public sector is helping nourish a partnership with that particular buyer, obviously, but potentially other public sector buyers as well. So if you're developing those strong case studies and examples, demonstrating the great solutions you've delivered on the framework, it's really giving you leverage to secure future public sector work.
So how do you understand what frameworks are available? So you can, any framework with the public sector is advertised. It's advertised, so if you think of kind of Contracts Finder, Find a Tender, these key government sites, and we can include that on the email when we share the information. We have a free tool, Tender Pipeline, which includes a few of the other portals, includes being able to dig into your competitors. So you could click into one of your competitors, see what tenders they've won, see what frameworks they're on, and that's often quite a good way to see what's coming up. Typically, they start looking at renewing a framework, certainly if it's been successful, 12 months before, 9 months before. So a really good chance to work back from that date and be able to keep an eye out on it. But you can certainly set up tender alerts, no problem at all, and free of charge across the vast majority.
Just got a message from Charles now, just saying essentially a current issue that we've been asked before. Would ChatGPT be able to help with the tender process?
Yeah, we're very conscious that we don't want to be the next Blockbuster here at Thornton Lowe. It's an interesting one. So we're using it more as a tool, or a similar version as a tool. I think it's really good at some things around helping you structure, or if you're starting with a blank page, what's required. But it's all about those prompts. It's certainly going to be increasing in importance, I certainly think. And also things around legislation. But again, everything's got to be sense checked. So quite often, certainly within our team, if we're referring to something and it's come through some form of AI, and it's got legislation in there, we kind of almost have to go back and check that that's right, and check that it's not been assumed by the machine. So yeah, I think it can be a really good starting point, especially for businesses where they might be starting out with a blank sheet. It gives them something to work from. And if we're talking about compliance, and quite often you've got two main types of frameworks: a framework or a DPS, where it's more about compliance, and they aren't capped at the number of suppliers, and they just want good suppliers. We're not talking about persuasive or highly compelling bids that are required. A more general response could help you, but we'd just be really conscious of it. Thought for a more competitive framework, and they may be looking for 8 to 10 suppliers, something like that. We think it's far better for it to contain your information and your key solution, but certainly as a nice structure or as a way to sense check things. But also from a bid review perspective, it can be quite interesting. So to stick in the evaluation criteria, stick in the question, stick in what you think is important to the client, and then see what it says. That can be quite useful. But again, by the time you've done that, could you have had someone just look at it and assess it using their knowledge? But no, certainly one for the future, I think.
Yeah. Just to round things off, I think we got a question from Ben. He's asking, do you think there's a reason why many authorities are starting their own frameworks rather than using CCS ones?
Yeah, I'm always really conscious that obviously we kind of work on both sides of the fence, and every organization, every person, they all have unique needs, and it almost pushes against the nature of a framework, or certainly certain types of frameworks that we're talking, where it might be run by CCS or ESPO or Fusion 21 or Procurement for Housing, for example, where they're kind of set up as a general tool to then do a mini competition potentially for something more specific. But what it typically comes down to, so the procurement manager will be assessing. They'll be doing a market assessment, which will include available frameworks and the costs and implications and fees of these frameworks, maybe 3%, sometimes to the supplier, sometimes to the buyer. So they assess that, and they put forward the business case of why they're going to go down whatever procurement route that is. Usually, if you've got quite a unique requirement, or you've got challenges that you think just aren't covered or would struggle to be covered within the framework or within the existing supplier base, if you're in a really rural location as a buyer, and you're looking at the suppliers and you're thinking, these will not be able to attend our sites. It won't work at a practical level. You would want to set up either your own direct tender and just do it as a contract, or if you want a bit more flexibility, you might do it as a framework. If you wanted even more flexibility, if it was in the world of technology or something that's fast moving and things are changing all the time, and you might want additional suppliers and a bit more flexibility, you might go down that DPS route that Adam mentioned earlier.
Great. Okay, there's have you got time for there's 2 more questions. Have we got time to
just glad to have questions now. Just
yeah.
questions. So CCS typically encourages successful bidders to provide a catalogue to attract/give awareness to public sector buyers. Such catalogues are usually severely restricted in page limits. Any suggestions on how to best? I suppose that's thanks, Michael. I think that's your starting point. So again, we would still want our clients to ensure that they're working compliantly and not tarnishing any relationship with that framework management organisation. But it's the start, or it's part of the sales process when you're presenting that catalogue. Quite a lot of our clients, where we've kind of worked on a solution, is they'll look at their client types, they'll look at their frameworks that they're on and the different solutions, and certainly if it's not through a mini competition and they're generating the lead and then trying to assess the right route for their client, each one of those frameworks, or it almost becomes, rather than a proposal off the back of one of those catalogues, it almost becomes what do you call it? It almost becomes like a procurement compliance document. Couple of pages explaining either how to engage with you or the benefits of engaging with you off the back of that framework, in addition to anything that you're being asked for there.
Brilliant. It's just that last one from Ruth, Dave. Is there a central source of dynamic purchasing systems?
So our system, we've got so tender pipeline. We've got a tab, a button where you just you can click and look at live tenders, click and look at live awarded tenders, or click and look at DPSs. We try and make sure it covers everything that is a dynamic purchasing system. Sometimes the public sector may not advertise it under that requirement, arguably not compliant, but as a result, our system won't pull it in. But if you just click on it, type in your keyword, or put in an advanced search, for example, put in, I don't know, cleaning services, you can just filter on that and look at the DPSs. The thing I should say about DPSs just quickly is a framework, large, or quite often a framework, can have direct awards. Rarely does a DPS, a dynamic purchasing system, have direct award. There's a couple out there, but it's not as frequent. So if you're thinking of a way to get on and quickly push your clients through it to stop it going to tender, it's rarely a route that for on the DPS side.